Welcome, Richard, to the Leaders Who Care series. It's great to have you here, man.
Yeah, nice to join you.
Um, Thanks, shout out to Nat for introducing us. Actually,
Yeah,
that was pretty cool of her, and but she is cool, so I wouldn't it wouldn't be a surprise. So
it certainly is. Yeah.
appreciate that. And best place to start is if you could introduce yourself, where you're from originally, where you are now, your family. We'll get to the business and gravity stuff in a minute. Your favorite color, if you want, I don't know, or maybe something you've never told anybody you want to reveal now. That could be cool too. Let's start with that.
Yeah, so my name's Richard Browning. I am the founder and chief test pilot from Gravity, and we build and fly jet suits. I'm sitting here in my lab in the UK, in a place called Salisbury in Wiltshire. It's kind of near Stonehenge, as probably the nearest landmark somebody outside of the UK might have heard of. And yeah, actually, my house isn't too far away, and I've got a wife and two kids. My two boys are in their teens. And yeah, we've been on a pretty spectacular journey.
It sounds like it for sure. Probably your kids probably have seen stuff that most kids haven't seen. I
Uh,
would,
but 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 like any kids, even despite what we do, and I think they do love it, and they fly as well. It's still not as cool as you'd imagine it because it's your parents doing it or your dad in this case. But no, they do love it, and yeah, I'm very lucky that they're great kids. But yeah, they're still my kids, so dad can never be that cool.
I think you're right. I have a friend who's a professional comic, and his kids always roll their eyes every time he tells a joke.
Yeah, yeah. No matter what it is, it's an unwritten rule. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, speaking of kids, then, what were you like as a kid or a teenager? Did you have this passion to create new things, or young entrepreneur, or being an astronaut or superhero? What did you do?
Yeah, so I was an only child, didn't have any brothers and sisters, but I did go to boarding school from the age of 9. So I sort of accidentally then inherited a whole load of pretend brothers and sisters. But I really grew up around my late father, who was an aeronautical engineer by training, but very much a maverick inventor and creator. And he set up his own business when I was quite young. And I used to just spend my whole childhood like making and building and breaking things in his workshop. I got into making little model aircraft, the old balsa wood and, actual paper, tissue paper and dope. Kind of, that's a word that doesn't get used in that context anymore. It's glue for people who don't know what that is. And very rudimentary. You didn't even have any control system. You just stand on a hill and throw it, and you did constantly adjust between runs the little flight surfaces and try and get it to glide as far as you could. That was entertainment when I was a kid. And it graduated onto little sort of two-channel radio control gliders and stuff. But yeah, given what I do now, I absolutely was not a kid who cared two hoots about superheroes and little plastic figures and all that kind of stuff. I was very much like my eldest son now. He is much more interested in taking something apart or playing with a magnet, even at 16, playing with the magnets. Or, it was sunny a few days ago, so he was messing around with a magnifying glass, trying to burn paper. And, all of the things that are sort of on the edge of what you should do. Therefore, it makes it more appealing. A pre planned toy where somebody has decided this is how you should do something is as equally unappealing to him as it is to me. I had no desire in those kind of realms at all, really.
Well, you bring back some great memories with airplane models and imagination and stuff like that, rather
Yeah.
than not. So that's actually awesome. So tell us what intrigued you then, and I guess that's part of it, to go into exploration geology at Cardiff, and then an 18-year journey with British Petroleum in was it crude paper and oil trading?
Yeah, my father was an engineer. I grew up making and building things. My grandfather on my mother's side was Sir Basil Blackwell, who used to run Westland helicopters that became Leonardo's here. And my other grandfather was a wartime aviator and then civil pilot. So actually, it was kind of there was a lot of background momentum without me thinking about it, and I thought that meant engineering. I actually did one semester of engineering at university. Found all I was doing was calculus. I didn't find that very exciting. I had a place already to join the military, at Sandhurst to become an officer here. It's equivalent to West Point in the US. And I just thought, you know what, if I'm going to be here at university and I'm doing lots of military stuff anyway, why don't I make my degree a bit more hands-on and interesting? So a friend of mine at university was doing exploration geology, which sounded like, geology is, hard to make it too glamorous, but it's very hands-on. You can see the processes, you can see the outcome of it. and exploration. The exploration side implied that some prospect of making some money out of it if you found something. Very rudimentary. And so I changed course to that. I then realized as I got towards the end of my university career, I spent a lot of time doing a lot of military things and met the girl who is still my wife some 20 years later. And I thought, rather than join the military, why don't I go and see if I can earn some money? And I discovered oil trading inside, this big, enormous company. And it was a bunch of 20-year-olds with flowery shirts making very quick decisions and earning lots of money. And I thought, I think actually in hindsight, it appealed to the innovative, creative streak in me because actually, albeit sitting at a desk making decisions in the commercial realm, it's very much about make rapid decisions, survive multiple failures, constantly reinvent, the opportunities and the circumstances we are trying to make some money. And not making a decision isn't an option either. All of those basket of skills are very much what an innovator or an entrepreneur does. So I think that's why I was attracted to it and the money. And I spent 16 years actually with BP and I got into all sorts of interesting realms. I accidentally discovered something that made $500 million for the trading division that I'd spent $20,000 on, all around ship tracking and stuff, which was pretty cool. But actually, alongside that time, I didn't drop the military interest, and I spent about 6 years in the Royal Marines Reserve here. So very proud, I got my green lid, as it's called, from many days of getting flogged and crawling around in the mud and everything like that. And that actually was a significant part of the inspiration behind the journey that I've subsequently gone on with Gravity.
Yeah, that's actually quite amazing. And I'm assuming they gave you a huge bonus to buy some flowery shirts from that discovery.
So I wasn't in the flowery shirt brigade then, actually. I was just on the periphery of it. But my God, did that catapult me into that flowery shirt brigade. Yeah, and I loved it. There's nothing in my mind more gratifying than having the left field random idea and surviving, I think roughly 19 failures in a row before you get to the 20th one, which then changes the game. I mean, who doesn't like that, right? And it's about making those 19 failures as low impact as possible. I mean, right now, actually, for the last 6 years, we have this ethos in Gravity about making failure recoverable as far as we can. So obviously from a safety point of view, but also from a reputation and financial perspective, we are constantly failing and breaking stuff all the time. And that is how we ruthlessly advance faster than any of our competitors. And frankly, how we've got everything around me, behind me here, it's all thanks to that attitude of recognizing that innovation is about risk and recognizing that risk is okay if the downside is survivable as far as you can. Hell, it's not perfect. You get run over tomorrow. But that ethos was the same one I learned on the trading floor, really.
Well, it is true. And I remember Dyson, who's from the UK too, also talks a lot about you got to fail. And even in sports, we talk a lot about generally teams that win championships failed to win the championship and they learned what it takes to win the championship after. Yeah. It does make a difference. Malcolm Gladwell, he once said that you don't need to always go out of town or to an exotic place or, to get new experiences. And so it kind of sounds like you heard him in one way or another with respect to that. And your dream, and I'm going to quote here, was to reimagine an entirely new, authentic form of human flight learning on an elegant collaboration of mind and body augmented by awesome technology. I had to quote it because I wouldn't remember that. Can you continue to describe how Gravity came about and by whom, where it's been experienced, and especially coming from a different industry that you came from?
Yeah, so back in 2016, as the latest in a long succession of personal challenges, I got into ultra marathons when I left the Marines. I got into doing calisthenics training. I like a challenge where you look at it and think, I'm not sure I could do that, but if I could do it, I feel like I'd be really proud of myself for being able to do it. Mm-hmm. And once you then go and accept it, then you think, I can't let myself down now. I've got to try and drag myself through it. It's a weird affliction. And this idea started to form, and unbeknown to me, it must have been related very heavily to my family background. I mean, I'll throw it straight out there. It's in the book. My father was this most amazing, lovely, warm-hearted engineer and creator, but he got screwed over relentlessly by people in business and ended up taking his own life when I was 15 because that, innovative, creative, entrepreneurial idea, back then, it wasn't such a friendly environment to entrepreneurs. And he experienced the highs pretty high, but he felt the lows pretty badly as well. I can kind of empathize with that.
Yeah.
And that just obviously, at 15, that was a pretty big moment. And I just saw this Y junction in my life as either I become a victim and just everybody around me was just like, you can just take a year out of school, you can do all these things and you don't have to do anything really. And I thought, screw that, I'm going to do everything. And so since that moment, I've just run hard at every challenge that's been put in front of me, and I put many in front of myself. And so I think, as a bit of self analytics, often through the medium of standing on stages and talking and doing interviews, I think to really explain it, I pulled together the unfinished business of taking a crazy idea over the line like my father had tried. I pulled that together with also that family legacy of aviation, engineering, flight, and with a healthy dose of what I personally learned about human capability. The Royal Marines, the military generally, at extreme ends, is very good at taking you and going, I'm going to take you further with your mind and body than you ever imagined. Right. And you learn, you surprise yourself on this journey. And so, well, I must qualify that, even my kids learn to fly this gear now at 13. It's now very easy, but just to have the audacity to imagine it was possible to strap 1,500 horsepower of jet engines to yourself did require a little bit of physical confidence to go, well, I think it should be okay. So if you put all that in a big pot, I did it for no commercial reason whatsoever. I just did it in evenings and weekends. I thought, you know what, if you can connect up human balance and human physicality, and humans are very good at balance. Walking around on 2 feet is when you think about it, really clever, let alone running. And then I think the physics leap was the realization that when a little jet engine puts out 25 kilos, 50 pounds or so of thrust, that can feel to the user, the wearer, which is not usually a term associated with jet engines, exactly the same as a 25 kilo force of you leaning on a table. So if I can attach this force to me to gradually remove the floor or a table that I'm leaning on, if I then move that around, I'm technically flying. And I think it was that leap that seems intuitive to my weird mind, but I'm constantly surprised by people who sort of hear this and then sort of go, oh yeah, like a thrust of an engine can be the same as a boring old table that you're leaning on. And so back in 2016, it was a question of just experimenting endlessly with how do you connect all that power required to lift you up, but in an intuitive way, taking actually a bicycle as the inspiration. A bicycle is a very small amount of metal, rubber, and various other bits and pieces that, when married up with human physicality and balance, achieves great things, doesn't it? And yet by itself, a bicycle can't even stand up. It just falls over. So I thought, I don't want to just slip into the engineer's trap of a seat and a joystick and put in your zip code. And it's like, oh, I'm flying again like a really rubbish helicopter. I want to fly as close as I can to me, and you can see the result.
Yeah, it's pretty it's pretty disruptive and daring and cool, and yet almost seemingly brilliant in its purpose and simplicity. The way you just
it's simple. Yeah. The hero with every jet suit pilot, and there's hundreds of them now, is human balance. The jet suit literally falls off a table by itself. God knows what would happen if you started it up and somehow put it on full power by itself. It would be horrendous. But with a human in it, even a 13-year-old like my kids, it is this elegant, precise, nimble thing. And all it's done is just added that support to, like I say, human balance. But now that can be anywhere in three-dimensional space.
Yeah, you talk about your vision to build Gravity into a world-class aeronautical engineering business, challenge perceived boundaries in human aviation, and inspire a generation to dare ask, as you just said, what if? I love that, because I think when space travel and everything, NASA kind of closed down for a number of years, we lost a lot of imagination that we as kids had about what if I could take a rocket and just keep going. What if?
Yeah.
And the and all that stuff.
I agree. I mean, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are doing a pretty good job of trying to backfill that space.
Yep.
But you're right. Generally, modern life does seem like it's got very much more introverted and safe, and less adventurous. And I'm not advocating, space as a realm has killed many, many people back in the, NASA and Soviet era. But yes, in terms of that, we're very lucky. We enjoy a huge amount of global kind of passion for what we do. And I think there's all sorts of weird emotions. I mean, gosh, we've done 250 events in 40 countries now as a team. And, not all of them me, but I've seen enough of the results of us flying in the whites of the eyes of the audiences all over the world. And I don't care, how old, what sex, what country, what nationality. There is something often tear-jerkingly emotional about seeing a human move in a way that our ancestors have always dreamed about, looking up at the birds and thinking, gosh, I can never do that. We've got, in some ways, hang gliding and stuff is very cool. But in terms of the smallness of the package and the visual impact of seeing that human, I think we've just about got as close as you can get, with known physics, to delivering on that dreamlike vision of what it's like to fly. And as I say, that was the backbone of what I intended to do. But you hinted at it earlier. The bigger, more boring challenge was, okay, now I've got this to work quietly in a secret location in the UK. Now what do? Do I stick a 5-minute YouTube film together and then walk away? Or do I actually accept the bigger challenge, which is to build it into a brand and a company that commercially fuels its own advancement? And that's exactly what we've done. It's a profitable company, and we just raised $6 million at a $38 million valuation, only after we'd had 5 years of actually sustained growth off our own commercial revenue, which I'm really proud of.
Yeah, you should be. We founded our firm 5 years ago. We launched at the UN headquarters in New York. We founded it on the premise that leaders in their businesses can do way better when they're doing good at the same time. Share a little bit more about how you've evolved, and you see it evolving, where you balance economic impact as well as social and environmental impact that actually, at least in our minds, it goes to businesses, to employees, to their families, because they talk about it, into the communities, opens up minds, etc. But can you share how you balance that?
Yeah, so I think one key backbone of what we do is around this idea that, up until this most recent raise, we were passionate about doing things that made the equipment generate its own revenue, such that you take a chunk of that revenue, put it back into the equipment to make the equipment better, to create even more opportunities, and you go on. I mean, it's funny we have to even mention that, but in the era of where you raise $100 million with a crazy .com idea, and then 3 years later it's either blown up, most likely, or you're a billionaire. I know why a lot of world runs like that, or a lot of California runs like that. I didn't want to do that with something like this. This was too important and too precious to be able to just blow it up and not succeed. I was determined to prove that it could be a profitable business. So that's the first thing. That's a pretty good starting point, because otherwise you take a load of money from one VC who guides you down a pathway, you run out of their money, and then actually you're left with something that no one else has said they've got any value or purpose in. So that's one thing. We are very lucky in what we do, that we are surrounded by, externally and internally within the company, genuinely the most passionate, excitable, lovely, genuine, smart people. They flock to what we do because they're inspired. They go above and beyond doing their job for money. They are building something that even the science fiction world thought wasn't really possible, and we do it every day. I mean, literally, I could put one of those on in 30 seconds and be in the air and be within a mile in another minute. I mean, it's ridiculous, and so we hugely exploit that, and the ability for us to inspire and motivate, whether it's corporate groups or whether it's school kids, it never gets boring. So I think that's a massive part of it. And it's nice how that, in the world of social media, actually we can kind of kill many birds with one stone, which sounds an inappropriate phrase nowadays. We need a less violent turn of phrase. But if our old model, and I say old because we're now in a different realm with this post-raise kind of thing, our old model was get paid, $50,000, $100,000 to go to an exotic location, unpack the gear out of 2 suitcases, fly in front of a new nationality, in front of national TV crews, land, do a keynote, and inspire a generation, and leave a legacy in that country and on their national news, and throw it across social media. And we just got paid to do that. And what companies get paid to have essentially a 5-year world tour of inspiration? And that's the game we've been playing. Now, it's been amazing to do that, but actually all of that revenue and the momentum that created, such that we could do the raise we've just done, allows us now to step it up to an even greater level. So the realms of medical response and special forces mobility. We were in Ukraine 10 days ago with the leadership of the military, and we blew their minds. And I mean, how humbling is that? To have their time for a whole afternoon when they're pretty busy surviving, and they came away just so engaged with what we've created. And there's a huge concept of operations that we can deliver there. I mean, who would have thought in a farmyard 6 years ago messing around with something that most people would have wondered what I was doing.
Well, that's so super cool. And we one thing we say in LA is we leave them wanting more, so we can do a sequel. Like, we're definitely going to do a sequel on this one. But the one thing I wanted to mention, all the things you're touching there, is the fourth industrial revolution was actually about technology, AI, all that stuff. The fifth has been pretty well slated to be about humanity. And you're putting them together, which is what's supposed to happen. The technology is supposed to help humanity, not we're not supposed to work for the technology. And we found that by putting that together, it seems like you're doing the inspiration, which creates more imagination, which creates more inventions, which creates more things. But also, for example, we're involved in projects that are going to change the food and ag ecosystem. We're involved with projects that are going to relate to national security. This I can see somebody going through a whole acres and acres of farmland to look at it, or whatever, different things like that.
I mean, it's at the moment it is niche mobility. So going to the shops, picking up the kids from school, etc. I often joke it's as practical as an IndyCar or a NASCAR, right? They are cars, but they're never used for those purposes for obvious reasons. However, I also reflect that the first motor cars were considered to be a joke compared to a horse 120 years ago. And look how relentless human ingenuity.
Sorry, they were actually prepared to ban cars because they were killing people on the dirt roads who weren't used to cars being on there. And at one point, they were thinking of banning cars.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's... Well, and another anecdote related to that is I often reflect, we are hugely defensive of our brand and our technology. And we have built systems for private individuals, but we completely insist that they train with us, and we reserve the right to not let them fly, etc. Because you can put it on and keep going and smack into a building at 100 miles an hour, and we are ended. I joke, though, and it's not really a joke, but again, wrong word. If I was making a new brand of motorbikes, you can fill in the blanks. It's funny how society would go, oh, well, I wonder how many people die at the wheel or the handlebars of a Ducati every year.
Yeah.
And no one lobbies to end Ducati, but that would not apply to us. We would be shut down in a heartbeat. And for the same reason as you mentioned, the first cars.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? But look, I really take that point. I as a miserable British person representing, let's say, on behalf of sometimes slightly miserable Europe, the whole science fiction superhero comic book DC Marvel thing, I have very much come to respect that and spent too much time in America, I think, where my take on that world now, and I didn't have this view as a kid, is if you take raw human creativity and passion and don't care about physics or money, that's science fiction. Dreaming about a little flip open thing I can speak to my orbiting spacecraft, or imagining some flying system, or imagining being able to run really fast or fly, do all these things. They inspire people to not worry about how, but they just inspire people to go on the first step of that journey. And the more humanity embraces that and has the luxury to embrace it, because I appreciate a lot of people don't have the luxury to embrace it, the more Elon Musk's, we're going to get. I really come to embrace that. Whereas actually, often science fiction superheroes, etc., are kind of laughed at as a kid's thing in this side of the Atlantic, and I think that's wrong.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was a big Star Trek fan way back when the sets of Star Trek were cardboard, but no one really knew it. And I remember Northern Telecom, which was now Nortel, was a client of mine at Deloitte, and I remember going to a factory. This is the late 70s, and seeing flip phones and all sorts of things, and I'm like, holy Toledo, 21-year-old looking at this stuff like. This is like, and then they said to me, you should see what the government has if you think this is cool, type of thing. So we have to open our minds, and learn from space travel and learn from all this stuff to invent way more other stuff that we didn't even think would be related, right?
Yeah. Oh, massively. Yes. I think human creativity is entirely fueled by that constant input of new experiences and new ideas. It does snowball, absolutely. And let's not go down the AI route, because God knows where that's going to take us. But yeah, exactly. I agree with you. Yeah.
So last question for now is, a client told me in 2021, he said to me, Mark, the year 2020 was the year that flew by, no pun intended, that flew by slowly. And I said, wow, that's kind of neat, because it's an oxymoron, flew by slowly. With everything that's happened the last few years, COVID and God knows what. And by the way, I have birds that sing outside my house every morning. And when COVID hit and we were locked down, I swear they were singing opera and they were saying, I don't know where they all
Yeah.
are, but this is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. The birds went crazy here too. And we all had a moment to hear them.
It's just crazy. So, what are you most grateful for, and what are you most hopeful for?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think I'm most grateful for my family, I would say. And it's the cheesy thing to say, obviously, all the time. But no, genuinely, I mean, it's easy as driven, entrepreneurial, innovative, businessy kind of people. We are all terrible at getting to the top of a mountain and slogging our guts out to get to the top, only to spend 10 seconds looking at the next peak and thinking, right, I'm going to go there. And my family's very good at trying to make me pause for a moment and enjoy the view from the latest mountain. And they are what matter. At the end of the day, we only have a finite number of days, and it would be crap to get to the end of them. And again, we all know people who are guilty of this, slogging every day and wondering, or missing the point, right? And sharing this,
or taking a selfie and missing the whole moment.
Yeah, exactly. So I think family does remind you sort of constantly of actually what matters. I think that's really important. But also, I should throw in there as well. Look, it's easy for me to say this and for people to listen to this and think, you only ever hear from people who succeed. Reading the Branson book of Never Give Up, and that's all great. But actually, it's not about that. We should write more business books about the 19 failures that led to get you to the success, because it doesn't feel good when you're somewhere in the middle of those 19 failures. You still have self-doubt and you wonder if you're ever going to make it. And that's the real story of these journeys. And I think I'm grateful I persevered through just endless, relentless, self-doubting, hilarious disasters. And it's just all I can offer people, I think, is just that. Know that innovative journey, whether you're just trying to suggest something to your Amazon warehouse boss and say, look, I'm trying to stick my head above the parapet and show I've got more to offer, and you get rejected with your crap ideas several times in a row. Just keep going. Just make those rejections and those failures recoverable. That's all. Don't do anything that's going to damage your reputation or your safety or make you run out of money. There's our rules. And just keep that ethos, and eventually something will bloom. I think that's a longer answer to your main question.
It's actually brilliant. Before you get to the most hopeful, Kobe Bryant, Lakers and whatnot, used to say, way before his unfortunate passing, he said, everybody wants to get the dream, and you should be going for the dream and whatnot. But what you got to realize is this is the dream right now.
Yeah. Which just falls on deaf ears when you're trying to set your business up and it's all going wrong and it's all hard and you're questioning your sanity and you've got a massive mortgage, and hearing that stuff doesn't really help. It's just like
it's hard.
It's really difficult. Yeah.
What are you most
hopeful for? Yeah, what am I most hopeful for? I think in a world that unfortunately is wallowing in this sad human reality that we pay far more attention to negative news. Yeah. We are genetically wired to worry about the wolves coming than celebrate that we've had a particularly good meal that night. The weight of the fear and negativity is always so much greater than the little successes. As you say in trading, making $1 million feels, like a tenth of the emotion of losing $1 million.
Right.
In a world that unfortunately is exploiting that fact through media and social media, I'm hopeful that actually when you meet actual humans and talk to actual humans, they are always far more optimistic and nice and intelligent and driven and progressive than we would be led to believe only if we digested media. I'm hopeful actual humans. It's very rare that you meet an absolute nasty person, and I'm hopeful that will see us through some of the challenges that we've got coming, and we always have got coming as humanity.
Well said. I'm grateful for having a new friend that really is a leader who cares. So and meeting you, and I'm also hopeful that I think more people are good than not, and everybody really wants the same thing, to achieve something, have their family do well, and be happy. So I'm with you there too. Thank you so much for joining us on this. Really great.
My pleasure, Mark. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.